The door was locked for years, but the night it opened, I found my husband's real life inside and realized our marriage had been built on one devastating lie all along. The door was already open when I saw it. Not wide, just enough to let a thin strip of yellow light fall across the dark landing over the garage. I stopped halfway up the stairs with one hand on the wall, my heart beating so hard it felt like I could hear it in my ears. That door had been closed for almost 18 years. Closed and locked. Closed through birthdays, holidays, grief, repairs, good seasons, bad seasons, and every quiet Tuesday in between. Closed so long that I had stopped seeing it as a door at all. It was more like a rule. A line in the house I did not cross. And that night it was open. I remember the strangest things first. Not fear, not even curiosity. The smell. It didn't smell like dust, mold, or old wood the way a sealed room should. It smelled lived in. Laundry detergent, paper, a faint trace of lavender, something warm, something human. I stood there staring at that slice of light like it might suddenly disappear. My husband David was supposed to be in Cleveland for the night, a work conference. He had called me from the road around 6, told me to lock the back door, told me not to wait up. His voice sounded tired but normal. Everything about the evening had felt normal until the power flickered during the storm and I went out to the garage to check the breaker box. That's when I saw the light upstairs. I should have gone back down. I know that now, or maybe I don't. Maybe opening that door was the first honest thing that happened to me in years. I took one more step, then another, slow enough to hear the old wood breathe under my feet. My mouth had gone dry. The light under the door trembled with the storm outside. Rain hit the roof in soft, hard waves. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath with me. When I reached the landing, I could see the brass key still hanging in the lock. That stopped me colder than the light did. David never left the key there. Not once. He kept it on his ring always. Even when we were first married, even back when I still asked questions about that room, he was careful with the key. Careful in a way I told myself meant history, grief, family things that weren't mine. In the beginning, he said the room had belonged to his mother before she died. Then later, he said the floorboards were weak and he didn't want me getting hurt. Once, years ago, when I joked that maybe he had a second wife hidden up there, he smiled without smiling and said, "Some doors are shut for a reason, Meg." At the time, I had laughed. Standing there with my fingers inches from that key, I wasn't laughing anymore. I pushed the door with my fingertips. It opened without a sound. And my whole life, the one I thought I knew, ended before I even crossed the threshold. Up until that night, I would have told you I had a quiet marriage, not a perfect one. I was too old and too tired for perfect, but a steady one. The kind people our age start to think is enough. I was 48, David was 51. We lived in a white 2-story house outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, the kind of place that looked prettier in fall than it did any other time of year. Big maple tree in front, gravel driveway, old detached garage with a room built over it back when houses had spaces for sewing or bookkeeping or storing things too important to throw away. We'd been married 17 years, together for 19. Long enough to finish each other's grocery lists. Long enough to know how the other liked their coffee without asking. Long enough that silence between us didn't always mean distance. Sometimes it just meant life. I worked 3 days a week at a physical therapy office. Front desk, scheduling, insurance calls, the kind of job that filled a room with people and left me tired in a way I could still manage. David sold industrial equipment. He was on the road a lot, not constantly, but enough that I got used to the rhythm of him leaving before sunrise some mornings and coming home with fast food coffee breath after dark. We had a dog named June, an old golden retriever with cloudy eyes and the slow, loyal way of moving that made me love her more every year. From the outside, we looked settled. And in a lot of ways, we were. We had routines, Sunday pancakes if he was home, grocery shopping after church even though neither of us was deeply religious anymore, more just respectful of the shape faith had once given our families. We watched crime shows in bed. We argued over the thermostat. He always folded towels wrong. I always forgot to buy batteries. We had a life made of ordinary things, and ordinary things can be so comforting that you don't notice when comfort turns into blindness. There had been grief in our marriage, yes, the kind that changes the sound of your voice for years afterward. We lost a baby boy when I was 32. I still can't say his name out loud unless I'm alone. He was born too early and lived just long enough for David and me to both fall in love with him before we had to let him go. People told us time would soften it. In some ways it did. In other ways it just buried it under dishes and bills and seasons until the grief became part of the floor under our feet. We never had children after that. There were doctor appointments, hope, needles, 2 miscarriages, then a long stretch of trying not to talk about it because talking about it made it real again. Somewhere along the way we became a couple people described as just the 2 of them, and I learned to smile when people said it like it was quaint. David had changed after we lost the baby, so had I won't pretend otherwise. I became quieter, more watchful. I loved him, but I also disappeared inside myself for a long time and he stopped knocking after a while. That's how grief works sometimes. It doesn't always blow things apart. Sometimes it just lowers the lights and teaches everyone to live in the dark. Still, I trusted him. That's the part I come back to when I can't sleep. I trusted him not because he was perfect, but because he seemed solid. Because he remembered my mother's birthday. Because he warmed my car when it snowed. Because when June got sick and we thought we might lose her, he slept on the floor beside her crate. Because people don't build trust with grand speeches. They build it with socks in the dryer and soup when you're sick and a hand on your back in the grocery store. That's what makes betrayal so hard to see. It rarely arrives wearing villain-esque clothes. If I'm honest, there were signs. Not movie signs, no lipstick on collars, no perfume that didn't belong to me, nothing that clear. But things shifted. About 6 years earlier, David had started spending more time in the garage. At first, it was believable. He said he wanted a workshop, needed a place to clear his head. Men our age are always trying to rediscover old hobbies when life starts feeling too short. He brought home wood stain, tools, shelves. Some nights I could hear him out there until almost 10, hammering, moving boxes. Once music, low enough that I thought I imagined it. Then came the locked room explanation. explanation again. He said he was organizing his mother's things upstairs and didn't want me tripping over anything. I offered to help. He said no. I asked if he found anything sentimental. He said not much. I asked why it took so long to sort through a dead woman's boxes after so many years. He got irritated and said I wouldn't understand because it was his family, his memories, his way of handling them. That should have bothered me more than it did. But marriage teaches you where the soft ground is. After enough years, you start stepping around each other's wounds without discussing them. His mother had been hard, private, sometimes cruel in ways dressed up as propriety. I figured the room held old letters, maybe bills, maybe whatever children of cold parents keep, because throwing it out feels worse than carrying it forever. So I let it go. Then the phone changed. David had never been careless with his phone, but he hadn't been secretive either. Suddenly, it was always face down, always in his pocket. If he got a text at night, he'd glance at it and set the phone aside without answering until I left the room. Once I came back from folding laundry and he closed an app so fast he nearly dropped the device. He said it was work. Maybe it was work sometimes, but not all the times. There were little things too. Cash withdrawals, more than usual. Charges from a diner 40 minutes away in a town neither of us had any reason to be in. A stuffed rabbit in the back seat of his truck. Pink, cheap, new. I held it up and asked if he was starting a secret life as a mall Santa. He smiled too quickly and said his coworker's granddaughter had left it there after a charity event. I remember nodding. I remember wanting to believe him because disbelief is exhausting. Around the same time, he started being weird about Sundays. He had always liked slow Sundays. Coffee, paper, football, maybe fixing something around the house. Then suddenly, at least twice a month, he had errands, a sales visit, a customer emergency, a friend who needed help moving something heavy. He'd come back tired but not guilty looking because real guilt doesn't always look guilty. Sometimes it looks relieved, like a man who made it through another day without the truth touching him. One afternoon, I found a drawing in the pocket of his jacket while I was emptying it for the wash. It was folded into a square, crayon on white paper. A house with 2 windows, a tree, a yellow sun in the corner, and 3 people holding hands. One tall, one medium, one small. Over the tall figure in shaky purple letters was written Dad. My entire body went cold. When he got home, I held the paper up between us in the kitchen. What's this? He stared at it for maybe half a second too long, then laughed softly through his nose. You scared me. I thought something was wrong. Something is wrong. It's from a fundraiser, Meg, a family shelter thing. Kids leave art everywhere. Why is it in your jacket? He took it from my hand, folded it once too neatly, because they were all over my car. I grabbed a few to throw out later. That answer didn't sit right, but he kissed the top of my head, asked what I wanted for dinner, and the moment passed the way bad moments do when no one is brave enough to stop them. I think that's what haunts me now, not that he lied. It's that part of me knew, not the whole truth maybe, but enough to feel the edge of it. And I kept choosing peace over clarity because peace is addictive when you've already survived enough pain. The week before I opened the door, everything got sharper. David started a fight over nothing on Monday night because I asked if he'd be home for my doctor appointment on Thursday. It wasn't even a serious appointment, just a follow-up for my blood pressure medication. But he snapped, said I treated him like a chauffeur, said he couldn't rearrange his whole career every time I needed something. It was so unlike him that I didn't even argue back. I just stood there in the kitchen holding a spoon while he apologized 10 minutes later. Too quickly, too smoothly. On Wednesday, he took a call outside in the rain. Who does that? He stepped off the porch and into the yard with his hand over the phone like I might somehow hear through brick and weather. I watched from the sink window as he paced near the maple tree, head down, one hand on his hip. At one point, he turned away from the house completely. When he came back in, his hair was wet and he looked like he'd aged 2 years in 10 minutes. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, he said, just working. I stared at him. He stared back. Then he smiled like he remembered he was supposed to. Friday morning, he left for Cleveland. Overnight conference. He packed a button-down I'd bought him for Christmas and kissed my cheek with his car keys in one hand. June followed him to the door because she always did. I stood in the hall, still in my robe, and watched him walk out. He turned once and said, don't forget the storm's coming. If the power trips, the breaker in the garage has been acting weird. That was the last normal sentence I heard before my marriage split open. The storm rolled in just after sunset. Not dramatic movie weather, just steady hard rain, the kind that makes the windows look smoked over and the whole sky feel lower. I ate leftovers in front of the TV. June slept by my feet. Around 9:30, the lights flickered once, then again. The lamp in the living room went out, came back dimmer, then steadied. A few minutes later, the microwave clock blinked black. I sighed, grabbed the flashlight from the junk drawer, and pulled on David's old flannel before stepping out into the garage. The side door groaned behind me. Rain tapped the roof. The garage smelled like oil, wet concrete, and cedar from whatever project David had been pretending to do lately. The breaker box sat on the back wall under the stairs leading up to the room over the garage. I pointed the flashlight down, found the switch that had tripped, and reset it. That should have been the end of it. Then June growled. It was low at first, confused, not aggressive, just uncertain. She stood in the doorway between the mudroom and garage, ears half raised, staring upward. I followed her gaze. There was light under the door upstairs. I actually said no out loud, like the house had made a mistake and would correct itself if I spoke firmly enough. The light stayed on. I told myself David must have left it on by accident before he left, but that made no sense. He never let me in, never left the key, never forgot something that important. I told myself maybe I had simply never noticed the light before. That was ridiculous too. Then I saw the shadow move. Not a person exactly, more like the shift of something passing in front of the light, enough to make my stomach drop. I stood there with the flashlight in one hand and June's collar in the other, listening. Nothing. Then faintly from above me, a sound like a drawer sliding shut. shut. 1,000 explanations rushed at me, and none of them were good. I should probably admit something ugly here. My first thought was not ghost, intruder, or danger. My first thought was woman. I don't know what that says about me, except that maybe my heart had already done some math my mind refused to show me. I told June to stay, my voice shook. She ignored me and came anyway, nails clicking softly behind me as I climbed the stairs. Every step felt louder than it should have. The rain got softer the higher I went, like it was moving away from me. At the top, that line of light glowed warm and steady under the door. The key was in the lock. The brass looked almost black in the dim landing. My hand hovered there for a second. I thought of every year I had respected that boundary. Every time I had chosen trust. Every little explanation I had accepted because I loved the man who gave it to me. Then I turned the key and pushed the door open. The room was not storage. That was the first shock. The second was that it was beautiful. Not expensive beautiful, not magazine beautiful. Intimate, carefully made. The sloped ceiling had been painted cream. A lamp glowed on a small side table beside a twin bed covered with a faded floral quilt. There was a bookshelf lined with children's novels, snow globes, framed photos, and a row of stuffed animals arranged by size. A soft rug covered the middle of the floor. Near the far wall sat a white dresser with brass handles polished bright from use. Beside the window was a child's easel, one side chalkboard, one side dry erase, with a purple marker uncapped on the tray. I stood in the doorway and felt my body go numb in layers. On the bed was a cardigan. Not mine. Small gray, still draped in the shape of shoulders. There were drawings taped to the wall, school certificates in cheap frames, a bulletin board with ticket stubs, ribbons, Polaroids. On the dresser sat a snow globe from New York, a ceramic mug painted with the words "Best Dad Ever," and a photo of David holding a little girl on his shoulders at a beach I had never been to. I think I stopped breathing then. The girl in the picture looked about 6. Brown hair, gap-toothed smile. One tiny hand tangled in David's hair as she laughed into the sunlight. He looked younger, lighter somehow, like a man caught in the middle of genuine joy. My husband had the smile of a father in that picture. A father. I took one step inside, then another. My legs felt weak, detached from me. There were more photos, so many more. David at a pumpkin patch with the same girl, older now. David kneeling beside a bike with training wheels. David in a paper crown at what looked like a birthday party. David at a school concert holding flowers. David standing next to a woman in 2 of the photos, always just at the edge. Dark hair, thin face, tired but pretty, not posed like a stranger. Posed like someone who belonged in the frame. I picked up the nearest picture. My fingers were shaking so badly the glass clicked against the wood. On the back in black marker someone had written, Ella's 8th birthday. Zella. The name went through me like a blade. I turned slowly, looking at the room again, but now it wasn't a room anymore. It was evidence. A whole hidden life arranged neatly in soft lamplight. Not a mistake, not one bad night, not an affair that flared and burned out. Years of secrets, years of fatherhood, years of memories I had not just been excluded from but erased from. There was a desk under the window. On it sat a closed laptop and 3 stacked notebooks. I opened the top notebook with my thumb. Inside were dates. Handwriting I recognized immediately as David's. May 14, Ella lost her first tooth. Cried until I told her the tooth fairy only comes if you smile when the tooth comes out. September 3, first day of 4th grade. Purple backpack. Wants to be a veterinarian this week. December 22, asked why I can't stay Christmas morning. Told her soon, lied again. I made a sound then. A small broken noise I had never heard come out of my own body. Soon lied again. He knew exactly what he was doing. I put the notebook down and opened the next one. More entries, more years, doctor visits, school plays, favorite songs, fears, allergies, shoe sizes. Pages and pages of fatherhood kept in secret, almost lovingly documented, while I spent those same years learning how to live with the silence in my own house. There was a file box beside the desk. Inside were folders labeled school, medical, rent, legal. I pulled one out at random and papers spilled into my hands. Tuition receipts, a lease agreement for an apartment in Camp Hill, utility bills in a woman's name, Rachel Mercer, copies of checks from David's separate business account, child support payments but not through any court, voluntary, regular, exact. Then I found the birth certificate. Father David Allen Mercer. Mother Rachel Lynn Mercer. Child Ella Grace Mercer. Date of birth August 11. I sat down hard on the little bed because my knees gave out. August 11. That date meant something. I stared at it until my mind caught up. August 11 was 3 days before our 15th wedding anniversary. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, maybe more. Rain tapped the window. Somewhere below, June barked once and went quiet again. The lamp beside the bed cast a warm yellow ring over my hands, and I remember thinking how cruel it was for something this devastating to exist in such a gentle light. I kept looking. Cause pain makes archaeologists of us. Once the ground opens, you cannot stop digging. In the dresser were clothes in different sizes. Little socks, t-shirts with glitter letters, a winter coat, a prom-style dress still in plastic, maybe waiting for a future that hadn't happened yet. In the closet hung a row of women's clothes too, not many, a raincoat, a blue sweater, a floral scarf, things left behind often enough to imply welcome. On the top shelf sat 3 board games and a shoebox full of birthday cards. I opened the box. Thank you for always coming, Dad. You're the best dad even when you miss stuff. I know you love me even when you have to leave. One card from when she looked about 10 said, in crooked handwriting, Mom says secrets make people sick, but I think ours is okay because love is private. I had to put that one down. I thought I was going to be sick. On the desk was a sealed envelope with my name on it. Meg, not Megan, Meg, his name for me. My whole body went cold all over again. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. It was unsealed already, tucked under a paperweight like he had meant to leave it there, or maybe maybe had read it 100 times without deciding anything. Inside was a single sheet of paper in David's handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I waited too long again. There is no version of this that doesn't hurt you, and I know that. I have known it for years. I wanted to tell you so many times I lost count. After your surgery, after your mother died, after Ella started asking questions, after I realized I wasn't protecting anyone, just delaying the damage. Her name is Ella. She is 13 now. Rachel was a coworker for a short time. What happened between us happened in the worst year of our marriage, and that is not an excuse, only a fact. I have never stopped loving you. I know saying that makes this uglier, not better. Ella did nothing wrong. Rachel did not force me into this. Every lie belongs to me. I have kept this room because I could not bear for her to feel hidden even if my choices made her hidden. I thought I could carry both worlds and somehow spare everyone. I was wrong. If I have finally told you, or if you found this before I found the courage, then I am sorry in a way words cannot hold. I love you, David. I read it twice, then a third time. What happened in the worst year of our marriage? That line hit me harder than the confession itself because I knew exactly what year he meant. The year after our son died. The year I could barely get out of bed. The year I slept with my back to him for months because every touch reminded me of what we had lost. The year I thought we were both drowning in the same water. He had built another life in that year. Another woman, another child. And while I was trying not to break into pieces, he had stepped outside our grief and planted a second future somewhere else. I don't think I cried right away. People always imagine tears arriving on cue. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes shock is colder than that. I sat there on the little twin bed in a room built for a child I never knew, holding a letter from my husband, and all I could feel at first was absence. Like every sound in the world had been dragged far away from me. Then I saw a framed photo on the bookshelf. Ella, maybe 12, standing next to David in front of a Christmas tree. She was old enough there to look directly into the camera with full awareness. Old enough to know. Old enough to share the secret. She had his eyes. There was no denying it. Same hazel green, same half-crooked smile. In the photo, she was leaning into him, and his hand was on her shoulder with that familiar casual tenderness I had once believed belonged only to me. Something inside me folded. I bent forward and finally started crying. Not loud, not dramatic. The kind of crying that hurts your ribs because you're trying not to make a sound. My forehead touched my knees. My hands covered my face. I cried for the young version of me who trusted him. I cried for the baby we lost. I cried for the years I thought childlessness was something life had done to us together, not something he had quietly escaped somewhere else. I cried because in that moment, I understood that loneliness can exist inside marriage more completely than it ever does when you live alone. When I could stand again, I did the smartest thing I have ever done in my life. I documented everything. Maybe that sounds cold, maybe it was, but there is a point in betrayal where instinct gives way to survival. I took out my phone and photographed the room, the notebooks, the birth certificate, the lease papers, the cards, the letter to me. I opened drawers, photographed contents, took close-ups of dates, signatures, names. My hands shook the whole time. Twice I had to stop because I couldn't see through the blur in my eyes. Then I went back downstairs, locked the house, packed a duffel bag, and left. I did not wait for him to come home. I did not call and scream. I did not smash dishes or burn letters or tear pictures. I took June, my purse, 2 changes of clothes, my medication, and the folder of photographs in my phone, and I drove to my older sister Corinne's house 40 minutes away. She opened the door in sweatpants at almost midnight and took one look at my face before saying, "What happened?" I couldn't say it at first. My lips moved, but no words came out. So I handed her my phone. She stood in her kitchen scrolling in silence while I leaned against the counter trying not to fall apart again. I watched her expression change with every swipe. Confusion, shock, anger, then something almost maternal which made me feel 12 years old and ruined all at once. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. "Oh, Meg, that was it. 2 words." I broke all over again. I slept maybe an hour that night in her guest room. June curled against the bed like she knew I was coming apart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room, the small bed, the mug that said best dad ever, the letter, the date on the birth certificate, August 11, 3 days before our anniversary. At 6:14 in the morning, my phone started ringing. "David." I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then it started again. Then texts. "Meg, where are you? Why aren't you home? Corinne just called me, please answer. Meg, please. Did you go upstairs?" I laughed when I read that one, not because it was funny, because some part of me could not believe the arrogance inside those 4 words. Did you go upstairs? As if the problem was my discovery, not his life. I answered on the 5th call. He sounded breathless. "Where are you?" "You know where I am." A silence. Then very quietly, "I need to explain." "No," I said, "you need to tell the truth, for once in your life." He exhaled like a man bracing for impact. "Can I come there?" Corinne, standing in the doorway with coffee in both hands, shook her head hard. I said no, we meet somewhere public. 10 o'clock, the diner on Front Street. "Oh, Meg, 10 o'clock. Then I hung up. I wore the same sweater I'd slept in. I didn't care. Corinne sat with me in the diner until his truck pulled in, then squeezed my hand and moved to a booth across the room, close enough to help, far enough to give me privacy. David looked terrible. That's not me being kind. He looked like he had aged overnight, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, hair uncombed. He saw me and stopped for half a second like maybe he expected me to disappear. I didn't stand. He sat across from me slowly, hands flat on the table. "I'm sorry," he said. It was such a small sentence for what he had done that I almost smiled. "Who is Rachel?" I asked. He swallowed. "A woman I used to work with." "Who is Ella?" His face changed, softened. "That hurt more than anything. She's my daughter. There it was, simple, clean, a knife laid flat on the table between us. I nodded once because I had already known, but hearing him say it made the room tilt anyway. How long? He looked down. 13 years. I stared at him. Say it while looking at me. His eyes lifted. He was crying now or close to it. 13 years. That room. I made it for her for when she visited at first. Later, mostly to keep her things here, to make her real in this house even if I didn't know she existed. His mouth tightened. Yes. I leaned back and laughed once under my breath. Not because anything was funny, because rage sometimes sounds like disbelief when it first leaves the body. So while I was grieving our son, you got another woman pregnant. He shut his eyes. Answer me. Oh yes. The word landed between us with a weight I can still feel. I think part of me kept hoping there was some missing piece that would make it less ugly. A separation I'd forgotten, a lie in the papers, some bizarre misunderstanding, but there it was, no missing piece, just a man, a choice, and 13 years of cowardice built on top of it. He told me the story then, if you can call it that. Rachel had worked in accounting, we were distant, I was depressed, he was lonely. They spent time together after work, one night became several, he said it ended quickly. He said when she told him she was pregnant, he begged her not to keep the baby because he would lose everything. She kept her. He went back and forth for months, then he met the baby, then he couldn't leave. Then he convinced himself he could manage both lives until the right moment came to tell me. The right moment, I repeated. What would that have been, David? My funeral. He flinched. I almost pity you, I said. Do you know that? Because you actually built a whole moral system where you're the tragic man carrying too much love. But you're not tragic, you're dishonest. He whispered my name. I kept going because once truth starts moving, it doesn't stop just because someone is crying. You let me believe we were childless together. You let me think we had both lost the same future. All those Sundays, all those work trips, all those lies. And then you built her a room in my house. Our house, he said softly. I looked at him so hard he stopped breathing for a second. No, I said, not anymore. People in the diner had started pretending not to watch. Coffee cups paused midair. A waitress lingered too long at the register. Karen sat rigid in the other booth, eyes on me. David rubbed both hands over his face. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. That's the first honest thing you've said. I never stopped loving you. I leaned in, then you should have told me the truth. He started crying then. Real tears. Silent, messy, human tears. That should have made me feel something softer. It didn't, because remorse after discovery is not the same as remorse before it. He asked what I wanted to do. I said I want a divorce. He nodded like maybe he had rehearsed hearing that. Then he said something I still think about. She wants to meet you. I froze. For a second I didn't even understand who he meant. Then I did, and my whole body went rigid. No, Meg, please, she found out last year that I'm married. Rachel told her. She's been angry, confused. She thinks I'm a bad person and she's right, but what? You want me to help clean up your conscience? No, I thought maybe if you heard. I heard enough. And I had more than enough. But life is cruel in the way it keeps unfolding after the point where you think you've reached your limit. 3 weeks later, through lawyers and paperwork and the ugly practical business of ending a long marriage, I learned Rachel had been diagnosed with breast cancer the year before. Early stage, treatable but hard. David had spent more time there because of it. That was the conference, the customer visits, the Sunday errands. Not that it redeemed him. It didn't, but it explained the panic, the increased secrecy. The room upstairs finally being left open by accident because his worlds had started colliding faster than he could manage. Then, against every instinct I had, I met Ella. Not for him. For me. I needed to see the human shape of the secret that had haunted my house. We met in a park at Rachel's request on a gray Saturday in October. Karen thought I was making a mistake. Maybe I was, but I had spent too many nights imagining her as either a villain or a ghost, and I needed her to become a person. She was 14, taller than I expected, hair pulled into a low ponytail, nervous hands, David's eyes unquestionably. Rachel stood a little distance away near a bench, pale under a knit hat thinner than in the photographs. She looked ashamed, not dramatic shamed, just tired in the soul. Ella sat across from me at a picnic table and said, I'm sorry. That undid me more than anything her father had said. You don't owe me that, I told her. She looked down. I didn't know about you at first, then I did, and I hated him for a while. I still kind of do. I almost laughed. Fair, I said. She glanced up, surprised. There was a long silence. Wind moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a kid yelled over a soccer game. Then she said, the room was my idea. I blinked. What? When I was little, she said, I asked him where I lived at his house. Not where I visited, where I lived. I think I was 7, maybe 8. He looked really sad. So later he made that room and told me I always had space there. I had no words. Because what do you do with that? The betrayal was still his, entirely his. But suddenly the room wasn't just a monument to lies. It was also the clumsy, heartbreaking answer of a child asking where she belonged. I looked at her hands, ink stains on 2 fingers, a chipped blue nail, so young, so old already in the eyes. Did you ever stay there? I asked. A few times when you were away. Once when the roads were bad, mostly no. He said it was complicated. Complicated. There's another word cowardly people love. We talked for almost an hour. Not warmly, not like family, not like anything easy, but honestly. She told me she liked biology, hated geometry, wanted to work with animals. She told me she was tired of adults lying and then acting noble about it. I told her she had every right to feel that way. Before we left, she said very quietly, I'm sorry about your baby. I looked at her sharply. Who told you that? My dad, she said. He cried when he told me. He said losing him was the worst thing that ever happened. I almost said, then why did he do this to us? But I stopped. Because she was not the place place to put that pain. Instead, I nodded once and said, "Thank you." Rachel came over then, close enough for the first real look. She looked older than her photos, more scared, more ordinary, not seductive, not triumphant, just a woman who had made a terrible choice with a married man and then spent 14 years living inside the consequences. "I'm sorry," she said too. I believed she meant it. That didn't change anything. Divorce is a strange grief because it is both an ending and paperwork. There are forms to sign while your whole sense of reality is still bleeding out. We sold the house in the spring. I refused to go back into the room over the garage. David cleared it out himself, or maybe not all of it. I didn't ask. Some questions stop serving you after a while. I moved into a small rental with a yellow front door and a tiny patch of backyard big enough for June to lie in the sun before we lost her that winter. Karen helped me unpack. My neighbors were kind in that careful American way where people offer casseroles without asking for details. At the therapy office, I learned how to smile through "how are you" and mean almost none of it. David sent one email months later to say Rachel's treatment was going well and Ella had made honor roll. I did not reply, not out of cruelty. Just because some bridges don't burn in flames, they rot quietly until one day you realize nothing solid is left to walk back on. The worst part wasn't even the cheating, if I'm being fully honest. It was the rewriting. The way every memory now had to be turned over in my hands and examined for cracks. The birthdays where he left early, the Sunday afternoons, the sudden extra patience when I was impossible to love after our son died. Had that tenderness come from guilt? Was he kinder because he knew what he was hiding? When he held me during hard nights, was he also thinking of the child he couldn't mention? Betrayal doesn't only hurt because of what happened. It hurts because it colonizes the past. It takes rooms you once lived in safely and fills them with echoes you can't control. For a long time, I was scared that opening that door had destroyed me. Some days it felt like it had. I didn't recognize myself for months. I was angry in the grocery store, in traffic, brushing my teeth. I cried in parking lots. I stopped listening to songs that had once belonged to my marriage. I threw away the flannel I wore the night of the storm because even the smell of wet wool brought it back. But somewhere in the middle of all that ruin, something steadier began to grow. Not trust, not yet. Something closer to self-respect. I started noticing how much of my old life had been built around avoiding discomfort, keeping the peace, being understanding, interpreting silence kindly, calling my own instincts paranoia because I didn't want to be difficult. I had confused endurance with wisdom for years. I had thought love meant giving people room to be complicated, secretive, wounded, and sometimes it does. But love without truth is just a performance with good lighting. I don't hate David. That surprises people when they hear the story. Maybe it surprises me too. I don't hate him. I see him more clearly than I ever did. A man who made one catastrophic choice and then spent 13 years making smaller ones to protect it. A man who loved badly because he was too afraid to love honestly. A man who wanted to be good in every direction and ended up becoming cruel in the places he thought were safest. That clarity has been its own kind of freedom. A year after the divorce, I drove past the old house by accident on the way to an estate sale. The maple tree was still there. The garage too. Someone had repainted the trim navy blue. The upstairs window over the garage was open, a crack curtain moving in the breeze. For a second I had to pull over because my chest went tight. Then I sat there, hands on the wheel, and realized something simple. That room no longer belonged to my story. It changed me, yes, forever probably, but it no longer defined me. Some doors hide betrayal, some hide grief, some hide the version of your life everyone else thinks you're living, and sometimes the worst moment of your life is also the moment you stop mistaking ignorance for peace. If I've learned anything, it's this. When love asks you to stay blind so it can survive, that isn't love. It's fear wearing love's face. I was never supposed to open that door, but I'm grateful I did, because what I saw in that room broke my heart, and what I understood after it broke saved the rest of my life.